Hey, right. Howdy, folks. Welcome back. My name is Simone. This is Goblin Fruit. I do videos at the moment about sewing. If you like that kind of thing, well, actually, this video isn't a lot about sewing. It's a little bit about sewing. All right, so I have talked about in a couple of previous videos about doing a video about the Dior Cruise collection 2021. Mostly because I saw this collection online and it mostly sort of came out as a video. It wasn't really a catwalk collection with an audience, because I was really interested at the time at finding out what major fashion houses were doing during COVID. And I found this show from Dior amongst many, many other shows, and I just thought it was, one, really, really beautiful, and two, something that was really relatable. Like, a lot of the pieces in the collection you could make as a sewist, and were sort of quite relatable to a lot of people's actual lifestyles, as opposed to a lot of high fashion, which has no lifestyle relevance at all. Well, in my opinion, or to my lifestyle anyway. So then I sort of, okay, some other stuff happened. We'll get into the video in a second, but mostly this video is the preliminary to just going through the collection and picking what patterns could make what, and maybe I'll put that on the end of this video, depending on how long I manage to make this chat go on for. But I think it's actually really interesting. Like, it makes a collection more accessible, or a brand more accessible, if you know more about them. You know, like major sort of exhibitions have shown us, like the exhibitions for McQueen, Vivienne Westwood, Dior, obviously. Like, they've really sort of opened up the brand to a bigger audience. I think a lot more people are interested in those kinds of designers because, I mean, in a lot of ways, you're allowed in. Whereas I think the high fashion world can be very much, that's a separate thing from my life. And also, really knowing a lot about the fashion world is a full-time job. So some of the things I'm going to talk about, I mean, this is very, very shallow. If you are like somebody who's really, really into fashion and spends a lot of time like looking at these high-end designer labels, this isn't for you. This is just a kind of a shallow look. And there is going to be a bit of politics, because actually the fashion world is a lot about politics. Social politics, which I think is really, really fascinating. So this video is possibly a little bit of a self-indulgence, because I really like talking about this stuff. I really like spending time seeing what's happening in the fashion world and thinking about it from a more, I guess, slightly academic point of view, because I think it's fun, because I'm a bit of a geek. So yeah, I'm just going to talk about a few things about, I mean, Dior, the fashion world post-COVID, also Dolce & Gabbana and their latest Alta Moda shows, and that sort of disparity between those fashion worlds. Yeah, if that interests you, keep watching. First, if you just want to hear a bit of more kind of sewing type stuff, we'll do some sewing stuffs first. This top I talked about making in my Adrian blouse review. So the Adrian blouse, the Adrian top from Friday Pattern Company, which I made from the original pattern in the video. Then I made some tweaks to the pattern. I say tweaks, I changed nearly every single line in the pattern, I'll be honest, probably about 80% of the pattern, and made a white jersey version. And I talked about making this version, and I've made it. Because one, I thought I should wear, if I'm talking high fashion, I should wear something a bit more fashiony or fancy. And two, because I've actually been invited to the ballet on Friday. It's the opening night for, I think, W.A. Ballet's first performance post-lockdown. I mean, we didn't really do full-on lockdown here in Western Australia, but, you know, post the big scary stuff, it was scary. And it might get scary again. But anyway, I'm going to the ballet on Friday. I made myself a top, okay? And I'll show you. Right, can we ignore the peasant skirt? It's like being a, you know, a newsreader who stands up and is only wearing board shorts underneath or something. But yeah, so this is my new tulle and velvet version. The lowered version with the sleeve cap. It's a little bit longer in the sleeve and the same at the back, really. But yeah, I bought these lines in, lowered that line, squared it off. And this time I did like a little stretch mesh for that piece across the front there. And then this is a non-stretch ruffled tulle that I got from Pit Trading. You know it's decadent when you need more fabric for the sleeves than you need for the bodice. Like a lot more fabric for the sleeves than for the bodice. Yeah, but I'm pretty happy with it. I'm feeling some kind of retro vibes. So, I had noticed in the sewing world of YouTube and Instagram that it's quite sort of a popular thing to do a sort of sew the catwalk look, right? So take a look from the catwalk or take a look from like Net-a-Porter or a high-end fashion label or fashion site and show how you could make that look or make the look yourself with contemporary sewing patterns and at home, which I think is kind of cool. And it's actually really something that's been happening, you know, since forever. Not since forever, but at least very, very much so throughout the whole sort of 20th century and a little bit before. And I mean, yeah, even like women's magazines in like the 1800s or whatever would show you things, and then people would take that in their far-flung place and to make it themselves, or to go to a dressmaker to make it for them. So what I'm trying to say is copying a look from the catwalk has always been a thing. It's interesting, like I guess the new swing on it now in this modern age is that we now have major brands like, you know, the Zaras of this world. What are they? Vertical. Yeah, I've forgotten the words. Anyway, who wholesale just copy heaps of stuff straight off the catwalk to sell en masse and have a very, very fast turnover on doing that. Which I think everybody would agree is fairly unethical, but it does kind of bring these looks to the masses who can afford them. Big debate there. Is it okay or is it not okay? Copying somebody else as far as their kind of intellectual creative property, yeah, obviously we have laws around that. The laws in fashion copyright are very, very loose. It is very, very hard to pursue a case for fashion copyright unless like you're copying rote for rote, like logo, or doing full, like, you know, Louis Vuitton counterfeit handbags. There is, like, I mean, I think for a very long time, I mean, when we see Vogue patterns who do, and I think, well, do the other major pattern labels do it? Have patterns from designers, and I'll have the designer's name, this is their product, and this is their pattern that made it, kind of thing. But then you also see, and I don't know if this is kind of a new thing, but I think it's sort of interesting. I think McCall's have this trademark sew the look thing, which I really, okay, they trademarked sew the look, and they always on the Instagram post say sew the look or whatever. I'm pretty sure the hashtag is sew the look, TM, which you're saying, don't copy me. I've trademarked this thing where we are copying other people. Copy, but don't copy me. there's something off with that, really, surely. Anyway, I just don't understand why they keep trademarking it. Like, they're bringing your attention to the fact that there are potential copyright issues here, whilst telling you to copy stuff. I think that there was a really obvious pattern in... Oh, wow, this video is going to be long. Anyway. In the latest Vogue collection, there was a top pattern that seemed really disjointed from the rest of the collection. And the reason for that, I think, and they even did a Make the Look Instagram post about it, is it really is a complete copy of an Isabel Marant top. There have been other versions if there was that McCall's pattern, and I can't remember what the designer that they're copying from, but I'll just keep showing some pictures. Look, I'm going to try and sit to the side of this video so that we can have pictures here, and the pictures can tell the story. My chair is on wheels, and I keep kind of slightly sliding because the floor is really slippery, so just work with me. Right, so is it okay to completely copy a very distinctive pattern and sell it whilst referencing the designer that you copied from, but not give anything to the designer? Like, obviously, they didn't get the designer's permission to do this, unlike on their other patterns, which do have the designer's name. And many designers have worked with Vogue and other labels for a very, very long time. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, at least in Australia, that designers used to sell their patterns, even to some extent sell their fabrics, to department stores here in Australia, who would then make those patterns and sell them on and say that it was a pattern from, you know, Chanel or Dior or one of the really, really big fashion houses in Europe. I'm pretty sure that was a thing. I haven't researched that. That might just be some vague memory in my head. But yeah, anyway, what I'm trying to say, this idea of copying stuff from the catwalk, it's age old. I think it's pretty much fine as long as you're not trying to sell it and make money out of it. If you are monetizing your video about doing that on YouTube, is that making money out of it? Not, because there are people doing that. Not that I'm doing that, because my videos aren't monetized yet. With any luck, that might happen. Conundrum. Anyway, ethics in fashion. It's a big, foggy, messy thing. Okay, so with this Dior collection, when I said that I was going to do this video on Dior, a couple of people commented about how much they love Dior, and they were definitely referencing 1950s Dior or 1947 new look 50s Dior, which is the most iconic Dior kind of looks. What Dior are doing now and today is very different, and I think that that's very interesting. So if you're really into the 1950s Dior look, and I do know in the sewing world there was and possibly still is, I haven't really looked terribly hard, but on Instagram there was a thing for copying looks from the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I hope I got that right. And those like beautiful costume looks from that show. So if you're into that kind of era, that's kind of fun thing to follow. But the other thing that I think is like TV show that's doing some awesome 50s Dior style looks is the new one, Lovecraft Country, which, look, I don't know how it's getting released overseas, but if you've seen the whole series, I haven't got the whole series here. I'm only up to episode 5, so no spoilers. No spoilers. Don't tell me what happens. I don't want to see any future images. But Letitia in that series, I mean all of them. I mean her half sister, I think in episode 5 is wearing this amazing pink sequin number that's split to show her stockings, and I'm pretty sure she's, from the very quick look that you get, those are proper nylon stockings, like it's period accurate. By the way, I did originally train as a production designer for film and theatre, and costume is kind of my thing, but 20th century costume is really my thing. So when things are accurate, I love it. I love it. And this show's pretty good, except for the bad girl, the white girl with the creepy eyes. Her looks are a bit off, but I kind of think they might have done that on purpose to make, because she kind of looks like she doesn't fit in there, whereas all the other characters, this is their world, they fit in. She doesn't fit in, which is kind of, if you know the show, interesting politics as it is. Anyway, Letitia's costumes are awesome. There is definitely in the first episode a very heavy reference to a Dior look. I can show you the Dior look and then her costume. And I do know that this blouse with all the fullness added across the bust and then this sort of underbust piece with the buttons down the front. I know that there are a couple, at least 2 people, I'm pretty sure I've seen on Instagram mocking up versions of this blouse recently. It's having a little bit of a thing because it is so cute and I want one too. Anyway, so yeah, if you're really into vintage Dior, gorgeous. The interesting part again about that, all right, so Christian Dior founded Dior, I mean, with benefactors and money and blah, blah, blah. His first big catwalk show was in 1947, where he debuted what is now known as the New Look. And the New Look is this kind of image of a very, very nipped in waist, quite sculptural, big skirts, also like the hat to balance the look. It's very much this very defined hourglass. It's very sharp and a very sort of corseted waist. It was really, really revolutionary at the time because in the 20s through to 40s, women had really become liberated from corsets and fussy dressing. Chanel in the 20s was a big proponent of that with her kind of sportswear type looks, and wearing clothes that were easy to wear and comfortable. Also interesting to note, Chanel was a woman, Dior was a man. This idea of a fantasy woman being dressed by a man and a real woman being dressed by a woman is still a thing today. And yeah, so Chanel's looks, they were comfortable, they weren't fussy, they were practical, they were easy to clean and look after. You could wear them in your wardrobe for a long, long time, and you could go about your life much more liberated than the Edwardian type looks that came, was it Edwardian before the 20s? I think so. Anyway, that really corseted, full bust, tiny waist, big butt, long dress, garments that, you had like 100 dressmakers to make, cost a year's worth of your salary, blah, 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 blah. All of that was history. Chanel's look was probably the paramount look of that era. I mean, also we had Vianney and the guy whose name sounds like Poirot, but it's not. Anyway, all of that stuff. Then in 1947, the Second World War has ended 2 years ago. Everything has, practical can be quite drab. Wars are very drab. And Dior's new look was this new fantasy idea of the future that sort of went into the 1950s with all of their optimism about the future, and also probably a bit of a setback for feminism and for women. I mean, what is it? Vintage style and not vintage values, because some of those 1950s vintage values for women kind of suck. Okay, so where was I going? Yeah, so that's what this paradigm of what we think of Dior is about. Now, in this modern world, we still have a real kind of difference. I personally, when I look at a lot of things, think it's quite obvious, this difference between male designers and female designers. And Dior now has their first female creative director ever, Maria Grazia Chorizo. She's normally referred to as Maria Grazia, so I'm a bit hazy on the pronunciation of the surname, but I think it's chorizo. No, that's a sausage. Chorizo. No. Forgive me. I'll put the name down. Yeah. Yeah. So she's been with Dior since 2016, I think. There has been controversy. I mean, mainly when her first collections came out, they were just not very exciting. And a lot of people went with boring. They were, in a lot of ways, very practical clothes that women could wear in their practical everyday life. And I think in the fashion world, there is kind of a little revolution, a very quiet feminist revolution that involves boring clothes. Because, I mean, just for some facts about what the modern fashion industry sort of looks like, according to Forbes magazine, who I think quoted somebody else. Oh, sorry, my computer's looking for me. Right. So this was in 2019. The stats were from the Business of Fashion, which, if you want to know kind of more fashion worldy stuff, Business of Fashion, but from the business end, is quite an interesting website. It is really hard to know stuff critically about the fashion world because a lot of the major players like Vogue magazine and all of the big fashion media really relies on advertising from fashion houses to exist. So they don't say anything critical or even try and give proper critique about shows because they don't want to lose advertising revenue. So then you kind of end up turning to things like YouTube and fashion bloggers who do kind of really rely on kind of a very gossipy world, celebrity world kind of point of view, which I know that like a lot of people really want to hear that stuff, which is why they do it. This kind of alternating vicious and sycophantic kind of presentation that, I don't know, kind of has a lot to do with sort of women's magazines, and it's just not a world that I'm into. So I don't really want to watch those kinds of vlogs or read those blogs. I'm just not really interested. So it can be really hard to find a lot about like interesting stuff about the fashion world. Slightly more academic, I guess. Slightly more intellectual, is that the word I'm looking for? It sounds so snobby, but anyway, tangent. According to the Business of Fashion, in 2019, 14% of major fashion brands are run by women and 40% are designed by women. So 60% of the fashion that we see presented to women is designed by men. And in this world, almost 100% of the consumers are women. So a man dressing a woman is going to have a different point of view to a woman dressing a woman. And I really feel that there's quite an obvious kind of look between what a man does and what a woman does. Typically, we see a different kind of woman. We see from a man a fantasy woman. She's, I thought of a really good word for this. But she's kind of, in a lot of ways, a goddess. She's untouchable. She's not of this world. She's not affected by this world. And in a lot of ways, this is quite a powerful look, right? Everybody wants to be a goddess, to stand above, to be stronger than all others, to be, untouchable and not unaffected, by the world as it is, all the grittiness of it, I guess. And I mean, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful image. It's a very aspirational image, but it's not reality, and it's not our real lives, and it's not who women are, and anymore. I don't think it's how really women want to be presented anymore, or present themselves anymore. We don't want to be presented at all, surely. No. Anyway, as I said, this is a bit political. Okay, for illustration, let us, because we're talking Dior, and the house that seems to really want to present that look, kind of hook, line, and sinker that look in the modern day, is Dolce & Gabbana. If you don't know anything about Dolce & Gabbana, they really have, there are lots of issues. There are social politics kind of issues, just enormous. They've had a lot of scathing, just mess ups. All right, from the beginning, I think it really started. Okay, so Dolce & Gabbana, two men were in a relationship together, are no longer in a relationship together, but obviously two gay men. That's how that works. I mean, I guess they could be two bisexual men. Yeah, they totally could be. Anyway, that aside, they came out as being against gay adoption and that IVF babies were synthetic. That was the beginning of the problem. I think they also said something against gay marriage. They said something about how sexual harassment isn't a thing in Italy, which, yeah. Then there was a major cultural appropriation, which, I mean, cultural appropriation is a whole different subject, which is interesting. I find it very, very nuanced. Anyway, so they had a massive problem with, it's not necessarily cultural appropriation, but just really, as they represent women, really kind of misunderstanding representing Chinese people as they were doing a big campaign for the Chinese market that was seen as just a little bit off. So they were going to do a big show. China and the luxury fashion world is a massive, massive market. It's like 30% at least of the luxury fashion market. Because it's just an emerging elite and, all that stuff. The luxury market's big. So a lot of big houses do campaign directly to the Chinese market, as they would. It's a business. Dolce & Gabbana decided to do a big show. It was just going to be, stop it. It was going to be absolutely massive, as I say, was going to be, because the internet furor, they had to shut down the show. It didn't go ahead because the marketing for it, and I mean, Diet Prada jumped on board. The internet went huge. Call out culture called it out, and a lot of celebrities pulled out. A lot of Chinese celebrities pulled out, and it didn't go ahead. Ouch. I mean, yeah, Dolce & Gabbana is problematic. This last series of shows, which is the Alta Moda, which has just happened, they've done 5 shows, 2 of which were digital and 3 were real life. They're enormous, decadent, opulent, Another reason why I'm bringing it up now in context with Dior is because this is very much like a Dior New Look presentation. So many of these gowns are in that corseted, nipped waist, goddess, untouchable, doesn't live in a real world. She is the 1% kind of a look. So there is this real economic disparity. I mean, Dolce & Gabbana used to really, I used to love them. In the 90s and early 2000s, the 90s Dolce & Gabbana was Madonna. In the early 2000s, Dolce & Gabbana was Gwen Stefani to me. Like, it was this rock and roll power woman, very sexual but strong. It has now turned into Dolce & Gabbana is Melania Trump. She did wear a Dolce & Gabbana jacket that was worth over $50,000, I think. It really, the entry point on a Dolce & Gabbana gown is $60,000, I think. It's mega, mega money. So I've really got to learn to shut down the computer when I do this. Anyway. The look that the show that they've just done, this sort of women's wear show of, it must be like 100 gowns. It's just enormous. 150 people, like of the 1%, flew into Italy, into Florence to see this show now in the age of COVID. Where I think, it depends like where you are and what sort of country you're in, but COVID has really shown up the disparity between rich and poor. Rich people traveling the world spread this disease, and can afford all the healthcare and all the rest of it, which in a lot of countries is very, very expensive and not for everybody, where they all recover and poor people die en masse. Particularly like the sorts of things that we saw in New York, and now we're seeing in Southern America and even in India. Poor people die while rich people are fine. And then we see a show like this from Dolce & Gabbana, which really celebrates wealth. And their idea was like, post World War II, we needed this celebration, this Dior look celebration. We need that now. We need to celebrate life now. And my whole thought when I saw this show was, this is Marie Antoinette screaming, "Let them eat cake," before they came for her head. It really, the dresses are just so beautiful though. They are so beautiful. But it's a fantasy world. Okay, so fantasy woman, this untouchable woman who does not get sexually harassed, according to Dolce & Gabbana. Just fantasy. Then we have Maria Grazia Chiuri's current version of Dior. And so Dior, the House of Dior has had its problems in the same vein. Particularly, at the time it wasn't really called out, but it is very, very obvious to us now. When John Galliano worked for Dior and his massive cultural appropriation and over-sexualization of Asian people, particularly. I think, what was the Shanghai something? Particular collection that was, again, breathtakingly beautiful, but really, really dodgy. Okay, if you're not familiar with the idea of cultural appropriation, it's where a dominant culture steals ideas from another culture, reimagines it in their own eyes, and therefore reimagining those people as something else, as kind of this sort of fantasy of what they are, and giving nothing back to that community that they stole from. That's kind of blanket cultural appropriation. It gets really hazy when, I mean, like, it gets, when you see, like, now, like, in the sewing world, there is debate as to whether white people can buy and wear Ankara fabric, right? So Ankara fabric is traditionally from Western Africa, Ghana, Nigeria. I was never very good at, I was going to say geometry. It's not geometry, baby. You were good at geometry. You weren't really good at that other thing where there's land masses and stuff. Geography! I got there in the end. I'm not good at geography, but it's kind of from Africa. Yeah, not doing well, Sim. I'm pretty sure it's Ghana and Nigeria is where African wax prints are really popular. Ankara, but Ankara was actually produced by the Dutch market to sell to Nigeria using techniques of batik from Indonesia. So it's all a big cultural kind of mess anyway, but now it does really represent in this modern world like an African look. And so some people are saying, like, you know, we want to buy from, you know, we want to promote African makers. We want to buy from African businesses or black businesses because of Black Lives Matter and because of promoting people who are not normally seen by us, you know, who don't really get such a great amount of, far out, I wish I'd rehearsed this speech. Who don't really get a whole lot of publicity because posts featuring and social media and everything featuring inclusivity of people of color is just not as equal as it is of white people. That was a really bad way of saying it. Other people will have a much better way of saying it. Anyway, but, you know, so a white person wants to buy Ankara and support a black-owned business, but can they? Is that okay, or is that cultural appropriation? And I will, very hazy, very, very hazy, because you want to support those businesses to give them your money, but then can you, yeah, but I mean, a lot of people are saying yes, you can, from the black community. An African community, because that is supporting their business. Then the other debate on that is 90% of the Ankara market is actually manufactured in China. But then again, yeah, so confusing. As I said, it's not black and white. It's incredibly nuanced. And then we have Dior last year. I think Dior Cruise collection last year featured a lot of batik and African wax print design or derivative textiles. And then I think they showed in Morocco, and a lot of people kind of called it out for cultural appropriation. I think it was that collection. Anyway, Dior have had, in even Maria Chorizo's version of Dior, there have been issues with cultural appropriation. But on the interesting and on the flip side debate from their response is that they do go to these communities to foster interest in these textiles. For the Cruise 2020 show, they went to Uniwax, which is an African business who, oh God, I knew some facts on this. Anyway, the majority of their product is printed in Africa, and a large percentage of even the textile that they print on is made in Africa. So it was really by Dior spilling money into this. Like, they went to Africa. They didn't go to their textile designers and say, look, I found all this stuff on the internet. Can you do me something like that? Like, so is it then, okay, so they show that, but then a whole lot of wealthy white people buy it, not really knowing the context of it and the history of it, And are they then appropriating that culture? Or is it good for Dior to put money into that culture and make that product have value because it's then seen on an international market? Yeah? I'm sorry, I'm probably talking complete gibberish to people, but I think it's fascinating. I think it's really fascinating. And I love the textiles that were in that collection. Like, I just think they're divine. And there is a little video on YouTube about the making of that collection. It's not all in English, so it's a little bit difficult. Maybe it has subtitles, and I was watching it on my TV, which doesn't show subtitles when it's closed captioned. I might look that up again. Anyway, it's very interesting what people are doing, I think. I mean, I think it was right at the beginning of Maria Chorizo's kind of Maria Grazia's Dior debut showings, where she did do a whole lot of t-shirts with "I'm a feminist" written on them, I think. And she was really called out as people felt that that was really disingenuous, that it was just good marketing, and that she wasn't really a feminist, she's just selling stuff. And I have a really hard time with that. I have a really hard time with people saying, we want you to really support our cause, but support it our way. You're doing it wrong, and so we're going to tear you down. It kind of, it's really hard. Anyway, I'm a big fan of Maria Grazia and this Dior range. I love this Dior woman, particularly as represented in this collection. And I thought the disparity of how the world is, I mean, it's post-COVID. We aren't going to massive decadent parties. We aren't going to, like, a vast majority of us aren't going to any parties. Yes, the world is opening up a bit. Things are changing. But, I mean, in the middle of COVID, like, in the middle of, like, for us, the big scare, sort of, end of March, everything's going crazy. I bought this copy of ID magazine, which when it was published, I mean, it was new on the shelves for us in WA, because it takes a little bit longer to get here. And it's, February 2020. And even, when they were making the magazine, like, I think the magazine world operates 3 months in advance, which is so interesting in this internet world where we get everything immediately. In the print world, they're still 3 months behind when you get the magazine. So seeing this fashion world from the perspective of, like, the big COVID scare world, it was just, so disconnected. I felt so weird about fashion at that moment. I mean, particularly sort of looking at, now when things have calmed down a little bit, reading this magazine, it's actually really, really good. I mean, there's people of colour represented quite a lot. There's lots of different sizes. This particular shoot has a plus size model in it. I think she's the only plus size model in the whole magazine. I think there's possibly the only people who are probably over 30 in the magazine are in ads or articles about them not being models. We've got an article on, is it drag or, I don't know. Anyway, like, there's lots of modern topical stuff in there, but just to see party clothes, I think, and people partying is just so weird. So irrelevant. Yeah. Anyway, if I'm going to tack the little sewing bit of ideas from this Dior Cruise collection, which hopefully I've been showing images of this whole time, I'll put that on now. If not, I'm going to make it into a second video. I'll put a little thing up here as to expect a second video. I think that's all I have to say on the matter. I hope that did make sense. I think all this stuff is absolutely fascinating, but you might not. I guess probably the other thing really with the shows, like okay, what sort of happened to fashion post-COVID? Because a lot of designers didn't show at all. Others did videos. A lot of the sort of video and digital content, I found like it's always been a thing in the fashion world, this kind of editorial sort of shots, that you see in magazines and people have complained about for like a million years. You can't see the clothes. They're very, very fancy photos, but you can't see the clothes. And there are a lot of videos like that. It's like, this is your catwalk show, or this is your, instead of a catwalk show, we're going to do this digital video. And yet I'm really not getting a very good idea of what the clothes are. And even some of the designers' photos, like their press photos that you would see like on Vogue, the Vogue website, which shows all of the major shows. I think it used to be called Style. Anyway, Vogue bought it. Something like that. Even the photos that they released for that didn't show the clothes very well. It was weird. Others did really innovative things, like they shot it on the people who worked on the collection. I think Gucci did that rather than get in models. The S.W.A.L.K show for Maison Margelia, again, it was the weird images that I can't see what they are, but Maison Margelia is really about art anyway. And if you're interested in that art point of view, that's a very interesting video about how these really avant-garde collections come about in this very creative way. From mood boards to everything, yeah. So I'll link that video if you're interested in that kind of stuff. What was I trying to say? And yeah, so previous to, like, one of the big sort of criticisms of the fashion world was the massive amount of stuff that they were producing. Like, we were getting more and more collections. The collections were getting bigger and bigger. There were more and more elements to absolutely everything. We had designers crumbling under the pressure and people committing suicide left, right, and center. Like, it was brutal. And then everything kind of did really quieten down over COVID, and a lot of collections were much, much smaller, which I think was very, very interesting. And then you turn around and see this Dolce & Gabbana who did 5 shows. This last women's wear show that I saw, it was just gown after gown after gown. It was enormous, and so opulent. Yeah, and like Burberry got a whole lot of flack for burning off what didn't sell. They got caught in just, I don't know how many, was it hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stock? Was it millions of dollars worth of stock? It didn't sell, so they burnt it, because you can't dilute the brand by selling off that much stuff at a discount. You have to pretend like it was never there at all. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, a little insight into the brand. It was supposed to just be about Dior, but because I've recently seen the Dolce & Gabbana show, was quite horrified. And the music, it's jarring. Anyway, if you watch it, tell me what you think. The Dior show was just, I think, to me, so beautiful. The clothes were really relatable. The woman shown was really relatable. Yeah, they didn't use any older models. They didn't really use any plus size models. They did use a lot of people of color. They did use a lot of people who weren't traditionally beautiful. Some very interesting looks. They're not all stick thin. They're not tottering around in high heels. Like, there's lots of sandals. The dancers shown had this real sort of passion to them. Yes, and it was really based in sort of, I guess, rural Italy, which is, yes, Dior is a French brand, but Maria Grazia's father was from this particular town where they based the show and used a lot of textiles from that area. And there are, like, Dior have released a whole lot of videos about that and that collection as well. Cruise collections are really, really important to brands. They were actually first brought out by Chanel to bridge a gap between the spring, summer and fall, winter collections for the 1%, really, because they found those people, rather than staying around for winter, were going to summer destinations and cruise, being on yachts, and needed travel wardrobes. But the cruise collection now is the one that's in store for the longest before it gets discounted. So it's really important. It's also quite trans-seasonal, so it works all around the world, depending on what season you happen to be in your part of the world. But yeah, it does tend to have a little bit more of a summer sort of tilt to it. But also known as holiday, so it does really have a kind of party aspect to it. Yeah, it's interesting. The fashion world is interesting, I think. Anyway, if you enjoyed this, you want to see more of this kind of fashion talk, let me know. I can totally talk about this more. It's what I find completely fascinating. Yeah. Anyway, tell me what you think. If you like this sort of thing, like, subscribe. Thank you. I have had a whole lot of new subscribers again recently. Thank you so much. And yeah, chat soon.